Welcome to Saucy Tea Time with Wolf, Bunny, Nalir, and Harle. Hey guys, welcome to another Saucy Tea Time. Today, neither Bunny or Nalir are with us because they are both getting ready for the convention we mentioned, Fanime, that's happening next week. But today, we have a guest. This is our friend Wolffriend.
Hello.
Wolffriend is actually from a game community that we're going to be talking about a lot today, called the Arcane Light, or TAL for short. In the community, Wolffriend and I actually play roles in the community in terms of Wolffriend for the main game, which is Secret World. You are a teddy bear officer, right? And what does that mean?
Well, the ways that guilds work in Secret World, for those who haven't played it, is they actually have Cabal. Secret World is a game where everything is true, and there are three main factions, which are the Templars, which are kind of based on the historical Templars, the Illuminati the same, and the Dragon, which is kind of a Middle East, Far East, Oriental-based faction. And when you're a player in the game, each faction has its own. You join one of the factions, and there are cabals, which are what the guilds are in Secret World. But cabal members are limited to a faction, only to a particular faction. So what the Arcane Light does in the Secret World is it's a combination of three cabals from each faction, and we all play together because you can do that. You're not limited to playing with just people in your own faction. So we have a shared channel that we can all talk to each other in the game and play together in the game. And what the teddy bear officers are folks that help new players and existing players along within our organization, within the Arcane Light. Secret World can be a kind of a complex game. It's very classless, which throws a lot of people who are used to MMOs, where you always have, you have knights and you have mages and you have healers and damage dealers and whatnot, and you're a ranger or you're a paladin or stuff like that. In the Secret World, basically you could be anything. It bases everything on a skill wheel and skills, and you could change roles easily. My favorite roles are a damage dealer or a healer. So depending on what we're doing, I can put on healing gear and heal, or I can put on damage gear and damage. So it can get kind of complex for somebody first wandering into the game, and even folks that have been in the game a while encountering new things. So we have in TAL what we call the Teddy Bear Corps, which is those of us who are chatty in the Cabal chat and the TAL chat, who are always willing to jump in and help new folks, giving them hints for how to build their character or helping them out with missions, which are what quests are called in the Secret World. Just provide general advice and hand-holding to new members to make them enjoy the game so they don't get frustrated and leave.
Okay, that's you said it perfectly. So how long have you played Secret World?
I joined Secret World in January of last year, 2014. So like I said, it had been out about a year and a half when I finally discovered it. I've been kind of in the search for a good MMO. I'm probably what you would call a casual gamer, and I didn't really get into MMOs until 2009 when I first started playing Runes of Magic, which is an old free-to-play game that's kind of based on a Taiwan game that a German company brought to the U.S. Before that, I was pretty much single games on my computer player. And I enjoyed that, but it was one of those free-to-play, buy-to-win, and it just started getting too expensive, so I started looking around, and some of the folks I played Rune of Magic with told me about Guild Wars, and I went to the original Guild Wars and fell in love with it. And then just kept searching for an MMO that I liked, because I always liked the story-driven stuff, not the just go out there and kill everything in sight kind of stuff. I went through, tried a couple others, Rift and Terra. Never really caught on with me. Guild Wars 2, even though I tried it, I didn't really particularly love it. And I stumbled on the Age of Conan, and I kind of enjoyed that. And I played that for about a year, and the guild I was in had a lot of drama, and unfortunately Age of Cohen, when you get to the end game, it just becomes a grind, and that's not what I wanted. And I said, well, let me try out this other game that the same company makes, because Funcom, the company that makes Secret World, also makes Age of Conan. So I downloaded Secret World, gave it a try, and was instantly hooked. I started in mid-January last year, and by February I had signed up for a lifetime subscription, what they call in Secret World the Grandmasters. So I guess I've been playing about a year and a half now, roughly.
Okay, that would be the same time I started too. But about when did you join TAL? After how long until you joined TAL after you first started?
It was probably by March. It probably took about 2 months. I started playing the game, and sold it around for a while, and got involved in the main forums, and saw a lot of people saying that the best way to enjoy the game is to join a cabal, so you can get the help and whatnot that you need. And so I started looking through the cabal section of the official forums, and looked at two or three, and Cal just seemed like it'd be a good fit, kind of a home of casual players who are also willing to do the hard stuff but have fun at it. So I think it was like March or April. I'd have to go back and check, but it was probably about 3 months I was in the game when I finally joined TAL. So I've been in TAL right about a year now.
You definitely took the you found the easy way to find them. I did. I was very bad at forums before I started doing stuff on the TAL forums. I found it through like third-party websites that have nothing to do with Secret World, but have just something to do with guilds in general, where random people seem to post info about certain things, and a few of them had the Arcane Light, and I noticed I was mainly looking for something that was still active and that where there are usually people on at our time, and well, it's a good thing I just happened to find it. I think we joined because we normally make our own guild, but like we had just come from Warframe, whereas we every now and then we'll play this game called Warframe and we'll get burned out on it because we just play it so much at one time. And we had just gone on like a recruiting frenzy. Within like a week, we had gotten like 20 to 25 people into our quote guild slash clan. And when we went to Secret World because we wanted to try it, we felt like playing an MMO. We had tried It Might Be a Story again a month earlier, much to our chagrin, because Maple Story never ends well when we try it. We just get bored of it super fast. Wanted to play an MMO that was basically unlike an MMO. And while that sounds strange, Secret World is perfect. But we were gonna make a guild, but we didn't want to do all the hassle of recruiting because we just got done doing all that. So for once, we looked to join, and it was up to me. It's usually up to me for these things to find a place to join, and there we went. And so I guess I was in town maybe just a couple months before you did, because about a week after we started playing, or a couple weeks. I think we played in the last week of December, and the first week of January we had joined. So about a week after we started playing, it's hard to say. All I know is that I had like blue QL10s. So all I know is I had done one or two elites before we had joined, and then everything past that was with Intel. But we should talk more about we keep mentioning Tal. I guess we should give some more info. We already know about the teddy bear cores that you mentioned, but what are the other aspects of Tal? Well, Tal in general, uh, I would call it what, like a gaming. I wouldn't call it like a secret world. I call it like a gaming community, just like a community in general. What would you label it as?
Yeah, that's very true, because there's versions of TAL in a lot of games. They have what they call their Ranger Corps, which is folks that I guess play Rangers. Somehow I never discovered them that, because that's usually the type of character I played in other MMOs. Um, but there's a group of people that they play a lot of different games, and they're all parts of TAL. They have their own version of the TAL guilds. I know there's a Rift contingent, there's a Star Wars contingent. There's a bunch of folks getting involved in some of the newer games. Skyforge, I think, is one. There's a bunch of folks in the beta there, the planet hanging out that. Plus, we have a general section where we just talk about other games that we play, because the odds are pretty much that if you play one game, somebody else plays the same thing. The Well, pick a game. Dragon Age. There's a big Dragon Age contingency, and the Witcher stuff, which I know we're going to cover a little more later on. There's a big community for that. There's a bunch of folks that like card games and talk about those. So it's a generally it's a fun place, and it's generally a very casual gamers place, and I think I really like that because, like I said early on, I'm a casual gamer. I'm not going out there and trying to prove my EP to everybody. I'm just back here having a good time.
Yeah. And I do enjoy the fact that even to some of us is well, one thing I notice when people get tired of Secret World, some of the newer recruits who don't use the phones as much, is that they'll come on and be like, I'm not gonna play Secret World, so I'm gonna leave TAL, which confuses me because I feel like we must not drive home the point that we have a lot of people on the forums and a part of TAL that like don't play games with like in the main like MMOs that we play, like Secret World or just or any of our division games, Wolffriend, blah blah blah, any of multiplayer games that we play together. We have a lot of people that their only contact is through the forums, but still, you can still be pretty active. Not only that, you're still a part of the community because there's so much other stuff other than games, and you can just hang out there and talk to everyone, and it's just really unusual to me that by this point we haven't made it known that if you're part of TAL, you don't have to leave when you're done playing a certain game that you joined. But then again, I guess some people may not want to get into all of that community gumption, and they just want to join us for the time being and get what they need for the guild, and then go on their way when they're done with the gun, when they're done with the game, which makes sense because a game is a game, and some people might not, get into that whole making friends online stuff. But let's see. So we play lots of games. You don't even have to play a game, and you can still be part of town because it's just a great place to be talking about games, just making up stuff in our, unrelated game goes or anything goes section. But we even got kind of strange to mention, but we even got like the Arcane Light itself is already 18 plus, but we already sequestered off a part of the forums that you have to ask permission for, so you don't get offended for our quote 18 plus area.
Yes, the secret adult area for the kids among
The
us.
fun house. What they have an RP section called Into the Filth because of the filth in the secret world. Is that what the final name was?
And I'm not really an RPer, but yeah, I think that's what they ended up calling it. Well, it's funny. You mentioned a lot of people that they come on the forums. They say well, I'm done with Secret World, so I'm leaving the guild. But it's a funny phenomenon I've noticed in general. I've been a computer professional for 30 years, and part of the reason I'm so chatty is because I did user support. I was a writer for a while in real life. Wrote a couple of books on the stuff back in the early 90s. Wrote for PC Magazine back in the early 90s, so I'm used to blabbing about this stuff. But it's a very small minority of the people that play games that actually get involved in the real social aspect of it, which is the forums. I've never quite figured that out, but if 10% of the people that a game's population actually pop up on the forums to talk about it. So on the one hand, they're also the people that really support the game or really hate it because they want to come on and troll. But there's this big community out there that's missing, I think, a big part of the social aspect of what's supposed to be a social game. And I never quite understood that. And I don't know that there's really any solution. There's always going to be people that are going to come in. They want their help, like you said, get what they want, get their elites, get their nightmare dungeons, whatever, get the gear they want, and move on. And there's others of us that are just going to love to gab and be social and find anything in the world to talk about, just as if we were all hanging out in a bar together having a beer, rather than being thousands of miles apart all
Yeah.
over the world.
Actually, I think I can bring a little bit of light to the whole forums access because even now, like Skyforge, as you mentioned, this game that's coming up that I'm excited for, but also the Secret World forums. I sometimes go and peruse them, but I never find I have anything to say because most of the time everyone else has already said it. But besides that, uh, I don't know, cause it was a lot easier for me to post stuff in the Arcane forums, and actually I had to force myself at first in the beginning, and then eventually it got to the point where someone posts something, and usually I find myself butting in and typing a bunch of stuff, so where TAL has broke my forum shyness, but only for the TAL forums. When it comes to other forums, like I go on and I want to type things or mention something, but then I feel like I really have nothing to say, or when I say might be incorrect because uh, I don't know so much about the Secret World forums because I've only seen one or two people of the couple of times I went on be actually really mean. But I know the Skyfish forums, it just seems like people just go on explicitly to disagree and be unhappy. And so stuff like that sort of turns me off from actually replying to future forums. Even now, I can't even explain what it is about either forums or any forums besides the Tau forums that I go on and I look and I just really, really can't get myself to like reply to anything. Like there's some things where I feel like, I might have something to say, but then, when I go to press the reply button, I'm just like, I really don't think it's worth it," and then I leave, and I find it really strange myself, actually, um, and so with you, I don't really see how you could what a solution to that would be other than me and other people to get past their own wall or shyness that they put up for themselves.
Yeah, there's not really. It is an individual thing. There's not really a solution to it. And I felt the same way you did. There's a lot of games that I only go on the forum simply to get a hint when I'm stuck with a quest, or to see if there's a patch coming out for a bug or a workaround for a bug. I have found that the Secret World's official forums are quite unique because people that are just on there to bitch get shut down really quickly. And overall, I guess because it's maybe a more mature game in its themes, and the fact that it requires you to think and not just go out and shoot things. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of missions in Secret World where you never actually shoot anything. You could spend 2 hours like trying to sneak around a building and
Yeah.
not get caught without shooting a thing, and figuring out puzzles and stuff. And that's very different from the WoW type of MMOs where it's basically go out and kill 10 zebras or something. Um, so you tend to have a community that's a lot more helpful, a lot more willing to reach out to new people and help them along. I mean, it's a niche game. It's Funcom is, for all intents and purposes, an indie developer. They're not a big company. It doesn't have a big community. I think best estimates are maybe 300,000, 400,000 players tops. Um, so if you go on the official forums for Secret World, you find, for the most part, a really pretty good bunch of helpful people. And the trolls are shot down pretty quickly. And if the players don't shoot them down, the moderators do. They don't let it get out of hand really fast, because the moderators play the game too. They're not just some random people brought out. So, but it is unique. Most other, I make the effort to go on the forum for every game that I've ever played, and yeah, I'm nowhere near as chatty as I am in TAL or the Secret World forums.
Yeah, and I really find it interesting what you mentioned about the trolls getting shut down. Like that's why like I'm only ever seeing one or two, and I did notice that usually they're not like they're like logic down or like people are just like calmly telling them that they need to stop and what they're doing is just pointless of destruction. But I also find it interesting that it's like the top players of the game, like Serenity. Like I've heard things about Serenity that he's not as nice as he may want to appear in the in game, but that may be because he has so many people approaching him, he doesn't have time to say hello to everyone. And that's just on an off-topic note, but still, professionally, in terms of how he appears on the forums and how he generally talks to people, even in game, even if he can seem cold, professionally, he's got it. What am I thinking? He's very well. He has a very good professional aspect of him, and he's one of the have the most guides in the game. Set up a website with a TSWDB for people to input their own guides, and him and couple of buddies of his look them and see if they're good and put them up. So generally, you have like some of the better guides on TSWDB. And it's interesting to see a player like that who's obviously devoted a lot of time to the game to the point where most people would just be high and mighty, and how he and who was the other one? I forgot. Yeah,
Claretta.
they are really nice, and they
Viking Start is another one. The Claretta, Charity, and Viking Start are the three that founded the database. And it's interesting you mentioned that because, yeah, that is an amazing resource that they've done completely on their own time. I don't know if these people have jobs that are just independently wealthy or what, but it's an amazing resource, and they've pulled it together so well in less than a year. Because previously there was a lot of information scattered about Secret World, but it was, the people that started it just didn't stick with the game for whatever reason and never updated it. And like any game, things are constantly changing. The abilities change. The build of the month changes. New stuff is added to the game that you need new information on how to do it. And they have done an amazing job. Props to the secret database. It is an amazing resource.
Only thing I dislike, but which is understandable, is if you notice most of the build guides that are up there, like for the different builds, usually has Severity or one of the other names on it, and that's just because when they get submitted and when they approve it, I guess it shows who it was approved by and doesn't show who the original build owner was. But then again, while that may kind of suck for the person who submitted the build and got it up there, it's also good because with Ceridi's name up there, if it wasn't Ceridi's name up there, I might not have looked at some of these builds and tested out some of the mechanics in them. But since it has the Ceridi or whoever's stamp of approval, it's almost for sure that build is gonna get some usage, get some what is it? Get around. It's for sure gonna help people because it's not a random name no one knows, but it's someone they know. And again, while that may suck for the original build developer, unless they change something and they have a little note of who submitted the build or whatever, it kind of sucks at them because not everyone's using this build and they may and well, I kind of only sort of relate because there are some times when when you and I or someone on our guild may make a build, and well, I mean we're nice people. We don't just keep it to ourselves like people in some other guilds. I know there's been some other cabals where someone in the cabal will make a build and someone's like, oh, that's really nice, such and such. And like, can you show me the build? And they just flat out say no, it's my build, or they try to trade for it. And it gets real hardcore. But in our cabal, obviously, we're nice and friendly, and we share everything. But because
Well, the funny thing about the builds, and you're mentioning Critty, is that most of the builds on TSWDB are pretty much good starting points. And part of the fun of TSW is to take a starting, because it can be very complex. I mean, the skill wheel is, I don't know, 350 skills. You got 8 different kinds of weapons and 20, 30 skills for each weapon. So it can get kind of complex to put that all together. So I think that what they're trying to do with the TSWDB is give you a good starting point, because Ceridian and Coletta, I don't know how they do it, but they probably know the combat mechanics better than some of the people in Funcom know it. they figured all this stuff out on their own, and they put a good build. And they say this is a good build to start, but feel free to experiment. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And you experiment, I experiment. We adapt them to our play style, and then we share them with people within our own within TAL, saying this is a good starting point, but you may want to use this if you don't have this particular amount of ability, use that one instead. That's kind of the fun of it. But yeah, I mean, people can sit and talk about, and there's a whole forum on the main FunCon forums that's 350 pages of threads about theory crafting builds. So there's people who just love to do this stuff, and you can use any of them as a starting point and adapt them to your own play style.
Yeah, and even some of Pretty's and some other builds got into the official deck list of Thicker World, which normally is good as a starting point, but as it doesn't even mix up two different trees for like passives and such, that's all it is, a starting point. You want to make your own thing. But when Tokyo came out, um, you needed a whole new mindset to how you approach the game because of the mechanics that it involved. We'll probably go into that later when we start talking more about issue 11. And Peretti and a couple others, of course, were good, really good at developing a build and a mindset to go against it. And their build actually got into the official Secret World deck list as a starting point for Tokyo builds, and they're really good builds. I've only changed one or two things about them, so I can't even say I've made it my own set because of how good they are. That may change when I play again because of the update, but as the last time I played, it was still working really well for me. So I definitely know this stuff.
Yeah, and the fun thing is too, I guess, in just before they released the most recent issue, TSW, for those again who don't know, listening to this, TSW, they don't have expansions; they have issues. That's what they call it, because they kind of treat it like a novel. And we'll get more into this when we talk about Tokyo itself. So each issue is what adds new stuff to the game. And just before they came out with the most recent issue, they came out with a release that they call, it was just a point release that they call the expanded enhanced player experience. I'm sorry, EPE. And basically, Funcom realized that it can be a very complex game to get into, so they wanted to make it easier, for new players. I mean, sometimes in the early uh, parts of the game, and you can back me up on this, you go from one zone to the next, and it's like falling off of a cliff. You get really good at one zone, you go into the next zone, and you die 3 minutes into it because it's completely different. So they kind of toned down the difficulty, so it became more of a ramp rather than a staircase. And along with that, you talked about the beginner um, decks. They went back and redid the beginner decks with the same principles of that you're not limited to things from just two weapons. You can use the whole skill tree. So if you go back and look at some of those beginner builds, they've changed. They're not the same that we
Oh,
remember from when we
that's
started.
really neat. Are they the same clothes at least? Or I gotta go get more clothes. I mean, are they still the same clothes achievements when you?
Yeah, yeah, it's still the same achievement. Sorry, I was drinking a cup of coffee when you asked me. They're still the same achievement. They just redid the deck so that they use some of the more common passives, like the common self-healing passives, which are good for when you're soloing to have a little self-heal in the game because you don't have somebody running around healing you. Which was what the original decks were sorely lacking. They really weren't what in the TSW world we call survivability decks. And you need some a little bit to survive, and to survive you need some healing. And so they've added that kind of stuff, and they bear a much better resemblance to what we would
That's
consider good decks now. So they did a nice job with it.
that's perfect. That's definitely great for beginners. But I know what you're talking about, but jumping off a cliff. I mean, people recommend, and I used to recommend the same thing. I mean, I guess it's more viable now, but a good thing before moving on to the next area in a region, like what is it, 3 zones in one region, two in the next, and three in the final. Well, not including Tokyo.
Right, right.
Um,
3-2-3.
and people would always recommend Oh, before you go to the next zone in your region, or if that's the last zone of that region, before you go to the next region, make sure you have all the loot gear of the equivalent level of the dungeon in that zone slash end of the region, which is good advice, but doesn't always help because when you get to the next zone, it can still murder you, especially as Wolf said, you need survivability builds. Like, it's not straight classes are only for dungeons, pretty much. Straight DPS, straight tanking, and straight healing. And even then, um, you can mesh it up a bit in DPS tank or DPS heal or heal while DPSing. You can or heal while tanking. You can still mix it up, but the only place for straight rolls is in dungeons or in the raids too. But that's also a bit debatable. And the world secret world itself is why the original decks that there were didn't really work out that well. Is they were more of straight class roll, I mean straight roll setups. So you go to these new regions, even with this fancy new gear, which by that time, um, you may not know how to build yourself because you don't know the stat defects, the what works and what really doesn't work because you're reading the descriptions. Oh, this sounds awesome. But little do you know that it may not be so awesome because of how they may have nerfed that stat or buffed other stats previously. So you would be going. You think you'd be going to the next area? It's like, oh, I'm ready for this, and then you just get kicked back into the previous zone. It's like, nope, you're not ready. I actually didn't do Egypt until I was all in QL10 blues from elites. And then when I got past that, I did the first zone of Transylvania, but I didn't do the last two zones story mission wise until I was all decked out in purples. That's partially because we'd been taught early on, okay, going to a new zone or region is quite unforgiving. Let's be more than well prepared. But also because the dungeons were so fun and I kind of forgot about the rest of the game. But it's nice that they're doing that now, making more survivability decks for people to start off with, because it also gets them into that mindset of making their own like that instead of having to look online and be like, oh, wow, why didn't I ever think to make a deck that deals damage but also heals me at the same time passively so I can live longer?
Yeah, the interesting thing about the classless thing, I mean, the secret world as a whole, I mean, it really is kind of a novel, or like you're living a television show, because unlike a lot of games, you don't go in the hero. You're not the hero. You're one of many people who are similar. You're an ordinary schlub who gets tossed into this thing, and you're completely clueless when you start. You get basically kidnapped, for all intents and purposes, by one of the three big factions who say, "Okay, you work for us now." The only choice you have is when you're making your character, you pick the faction. But as an in-game character, you don't have the choice. You wake up one morning with some superpowers, and somebody knocks on your door and says, "You're coming with us," and that's how you basically get introduced to the game. So you're not going in a superhero. You're not going in, with all these ungodly powers. You're learning as you're going along, and that turns a lot of people off. But a lot of people also love it because it's like you're not um, you're not the one and only. You're stumbling around in the dark trying to figure out what the hell is going on around you. And as you go through the game, you have to keep adapting. And that's the beauty of the skill wheel, is that what worked in those early zones may not necessarily work later on because the mobs have different abilities. They move around more. One of the nice things about TSW combat is most of the skills you can move while you're attacking, which is very rare in MMOs. You're usually rooted to the ground while you're launching a particular attack. That's not true in TSW. So you have to learn how to move. You have to learn how to get out of attacks. You have to learn that some mobs are better to come back behind. There are some mobs that will kill you if you attack them with an affliction, for example. Basically, if you poison them, they'll poison you back twice as bad and kill you. So for those mobs, you can't use poison, and you learn that as you go along. So other mobs you can't impair. If you impair them, they impair you. Oops. Yeah. So it's the adaptability, I think, that makes it so much fun, and that's where the whole deck theory comes in. That I started out. I came into TSW as, with my ranger mindset. So, assault rifle, I have to have an assault rifle. Well, now in the later zone, 90% of the time I'm running around with a blade because it just fits better. It works better.
Yeah, it's definitely easier to slide the blade too. It's really funny because there's some hardcore players. I don't think they're in like Cabal anymore, but when they were making a new character and they had an alt, and they were talking about, hey, what do you guys think would be the best thing for Assassin's Creed as I'm going through these earlier levels? And like, I kept trying to tell them, it's like right now you're on an alt in a low level where the rules are different for us higher levels where it's only like where most of the by this point most of the stuff is not rendered moot but won't work as well up here. You have a beautiful chance right now to just go nuts and experiment like crazy and just try crazy things that you couldn't do at the high level, but they sadly they weren't getting what I was saying. But I really like that what you like when you're mentioning how as you get through the difficulties of the game, stuff that used to work just doesn't work anymore, or it works differently, and you have to find different ways to go about. I mean, I know when I do dungeons, sometimes like when I'm not lazy. We'll have to wait before each fight in a dungeon because I'll be changing my abilities around just so it could be exactly perfect for that fight. When people ask me why I don't save it, well, it's because it's usually different every time I go through because I'll be going looking through. So what can help me with this fight right now? Like how do I feel? How is my mentality? Do I think I can move around as fast as often as I do? Am I a little bit sluggish on my reflexes? Am I tired? Let me let me do abilities or passives that will help me out with my sluggishness, or maybe I'm overly energetic and I'm just like bouncing off the wall, running in circles around the bosses while I'm attacking for no reason. Maybe nothing can hit me. Let me put some abilities that'll complement that. Anything goes. Like I said, it's very versatile, and you can save decks, but your decks are basically just well, I when I say decks, I don't mean the starter decks. For those of you who don't play Secret World, we call when you save your gear in the game, you can save exactly what you're wearing, what weapons you have on, and what abilities are tied with that. And you can save a bunch. You can save quite a few. You end up buying more slots, but really you can download a mod that saves the abilities for you, and you just have to manually switch in the weapons themselves. But at any rate, I have a lot of decks, but most of them are simply as a point to make it easier to build around that, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah, exactly. I got into the deck saving thing. I mean, like I said, you don't start out. The gear manager is the built-in game thing that saves everything. It saves what Secret World doesn't use armor. For those who are familiar with, it uses what they call talismans to determine your stats. There's different things like your head talisman and your neck talisman is a necklace, and you have rings and bracelets, and that's where your stats come from. So one of the beauties of TSW is they have a whole separate clothing system. So what your character looks like has nothing to do with what your character stats are, which is fun because some of us go nuts buying clothes in game, and we have a different set for whatever our mood is. But the gear manager will save all that. So when you find a build you like and you get all your pieces together. So if like when you go into one dungeon as a DPS, you have your basic DPS build. You save it with all your DPS tallies, and then the next time they say, "Oh, we need you to heal this one," you could push one button, and now all of a sudden all your healing gear is on. But again, that's only a starting point, and this mod you were talking about, this deck manager, uh, lets you save hundreds and hundreds. And I recently went through mine, and I had like 200 and something builds, and I said, "Oh, I got to clean this up," because I was doing exactly that. I was saving a build for every boss, and it's like it takes 2 seconds to change. So why am I saving every build for every possible thing in the game? And I've learned in 2 years, a year and a half, a lot more now. It's easier just to change on the fly and use the gear manager for basic guilds and maybe the deck manager for slight adaptations. If I need something that keeps me from getting knocked down for these particular mobs, but everything else is the same. I'll use that as the deck manager to change, so it just changes one or two skills, and I don't worry about anything
Yeah,
else.
and eventually you'll be so comfortable with the game that you won't have to think much. I'm sure if I went in right now, I'd be a bit confused. But I did a scenario last week, and it didn't take too long for me to figure out what my build was and relearn what I needed to change for certain situations. So like you play the game long enough, you're gonna know what works for you and what you need. I mean, I never would have thought that like I'd be here like I'd ever reach an end game of an MMO because I don't think I've ever reached, with the exception of Wizard 101, which I don't count because that game is a child's game and it's quite easy to reach the end game. Um, I played it when I was little, probably 16 to 18 years old.
The Dark Ages.
Um, with the exception of that, with the exception of that, I never reached the end game of MMO because it always seems so far off and it's so overwhelming. Secret World was no different, always seemed so overwhelming. But when I started getting purple gear, and eventually I started making my own builds, and I was surprised at myself because I'd never played. Uh, Secret World was the start of me theory crafting in any game, be it a single player RPG or, another MMO. It's, well, maybe I should not count the trading card games because I did a lot of theory crafting in Magic Gathering Yu-Gi-Oh, but I'm talking about video games. Think was the first one where I've actually messed with stats, tested things out, and actually made things on my own. Did research to find out from other sources what certain stats work, what certain abilities work, and what they could do, and then tested it out for myself. It was the first time, and Think World makes it quite easy to do that. I can't explain how it makes it easy to do that, but since it's so versatile and almost anything works, I guess that's how it does it. Since almost anything works, you can actually pretty much make a viable build with almost every ability. I think they're trying to make it so that you can use every ability, since there are some that no one uses, but you can pretty much make a working build for any situation. And it's it's got me into theory crafting with any game now, and I never knew I loved it so much. And Secret World opened that for me.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do that. I mean,
It,
a lot of people don't like that. They want to go in with with the build of the week and just slaughter things and not have to think about it. And I think that's what makes Secret World somewhat of a niche game because you're either going to go into it and you're going to fall in love with the system, or you're going to hate it and move on. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of middle ground to people who sort of like the game and play it occasionally. I mean, there are people who play it and then go away for a while and then come back when a new issue is released, which is not the same thing because they're still coming back. It's not. It's just there's not that middle ground. There's either people say, "Oh, this sucks. Why do you play this game? I'm out of here," and there's people that just fall in love with the game and we're there to the bitter end.
yeah, it really is. Yeah, this reminds me that I am a bit spoiled by Secret World in terms of difficulty, the technicality of the game, which sounds strange, but I'm spoiled by how hard it is. Because when I go to other games, like when I was going to Skyforge, and I was like, I was a bit disappointed because it's the first MMO I played in a long time. Um, because I haven't played anything since Secret World, I don't think. And like, I was like, wow, this isn't as technical as I'd hoped it to be. But that's Secret World for you. You can't get beyond having you can beyond having poor gear, and you can even get past having poor quote level. There's no levels. There's only abilities, 350 abilities. You have a bar, and there's like I think there's 3 lines on that bar that give you an ability point, and once you complete the whole bar, you get a skill point, and a skill point will get you into the only which determines your quote level, which is basically gear level, quality, the quality level of the items you can wear, and the max. Well, the max pre-end game stuff is 10. But beyond that is 10.4, but you don't need to level up beyond 10 in terms of quality level. In fact, if you want to get to the next level, I think you only have to be one below. You just need to be quality level 10 in order to wear 10.1 and up stuff. But at any rate, you can get past. This game is quite good for getting past like gear difficulties with skill and mechanic knowledge. People could be using the same build and have exactly the same gear level for DPS, for example, or tanking, but it doesn't mean they both do just as good. There is quite a bit of skill involved. Like I heard a mod, someone who was in our guild, who's a friend of mine, a mod was in a dungeon run with someone who was using a standard, not the fancy a flick build uh, for a shotgun and pistol, but was using a standard pistol shotgun build that looks like every bit like the one I first started one, the starter one that's passed out to everyone like candy, and was getting
Yeah, I think I have that one too. Yeah.
yeah, but was somehow and he had no better gear than like Ahmad or any of the other DPS who were using like the melee hammer, and Ahmad was using a build that she made that was really good, and he was out DPSing everyone by 1k or 1.5k or 2k at times. It depended how quick the fight went. But anyway, he was wrecking the bosses and greatly outperforming everyone. And he had the same build that almost everyone else had. It was just a matter of how he used it. And even I can't even think about how, I mean, I think even I mean, it's because I can't imagine us at the higher level, like we're good with our builds. It doesn't matter because we've had lots of practice with them. But I can't imagine, a mod can't imagine. I'm sure a lot of high-end build crafters besides us and all of us in the you get what I was saying. The people that have done the end game dungeons, because when I said even I felt like it was sort of pretentious, but I didn't mean it that way. So I was trying to explain it away. I'm just saying that I'm so flabbergasted that this guy managed to pull off DPS with such a standard build that I can't imagine what he did differently than everyone else.
Well, that's where you get into that's where you get into a player skill level, and to fill in a little background here, the way TSW's skills work, you have a dual concept. Well, the first thing is you have two weapons. You always carry two weapons. There's no primary, there's no secondary. I mean, you get 7 skills on your skill bar, and you're switching interchangeably between weapons, so neither one is primary. But the way the skills work, and what a lot of people have some difficulty in understanding early on, is the concept of builders and consumers. Every weapon will build a counter, usually up to 5. Some weapons, like some of the more magical based, like fists and whatnot, and blades, will go in with 5 to start. But a lot of ones that are single attack, you have to build this counter on a mob, and then you have a consumer, which, based on the number, the level of this counter, does higher and higher damage. So you have to do these builders and then this consumer. For the most part, you can do really, if you get the hang of that system, you can do really pretty good damage. Just the right time to hit your consumers, so you get the maximum damage out of it. But if someone is really, I mean, they have a focus that, you know, I I can't even imagine, because, like you, I'm pretty good, but I'm not great. But I can't imagine the focus that they can hit the consumer at the right moment every time. Just get the right things going off at the right time, and they're just so focused, and their twitch reflex is so good that they could do that. Yeah, they're going to take the exact same build that you and I do really pretty good at. and they're just going to blow us away.
Yeah.
Because they're hitting everything perfectly. They're hitting that one key right at the second when they have to, whereas we're like, my arthritis is acting up one day, or like you said, you're feeling a little tired, and so we're missing a rotation and not quite getting it the right way. So we're still doing good DPS, and the fights ain't lasting long, but we ain't,
Yeah, we ain't up to that level of the people who just know they're building it out. They're born holding it or something. Yeah, I really like that about this game. And like I say, I'm spoiled by how technical it is because I love technical things, technified things that require you to not only remember mechanics, but also execute them with perfection. And when I went to, like I said, Skyforge, or even MMO I was playing recently till I ran out of subscription, Final Fantasy 14, they don't have interchangeable builds. They have, the classes slash jobs, and you're always gonna get those abilities slash passives for that class or job. And I mean, it's not quote easy to figure out how to maximize your DPS, etc., healing, etc., with those abilities, but it's easier than I would say in Secret World, simply because you don't have 350 abilities bearing you down. You have what you have to work with, and maybe 5 abilities you're allowed to take away from other classes, which is neat. From other classes, and I mean, coming from Secret World, it was easier, if not easy, for me to figure out what I should do. At first, the only hard part was the fact that in Secret World, for most of the times that I played it, people have always discounted dots, right? And even a couple of builds that I know that were like incredible DPS, they were situational. Well, they're more situational in terms you want to get that much DPS on raids. But anyways, Final Fantasy is the opposite, where, well, it's not the opposite, where while you're maximizing your DPS and what you do with your actives, you always want to keep 100% DOT time up, and your buffs and debuffs. And so where Secret World has, okay, we activated our 3 buffs and our self buffs in the beginning, we'll activate them when they come again. Whereas Final Fantasy 14 usually has timer buffs like that, but they also have buffs that come when you ever use an ability in a certain condition and its upkeep, where it's still technical enough that I still love the game, especially when I play like Monk, which is the most technical class. Thank you, Secret World, for making me want to play the most difficult classes in games now, because they want them to match the difficulty of your level. But it's still not on par with Secret World, and so Secret World really spoils us in how technical and awesome it is. But I think we could go on all day about the little intricacies in it. We should um we should go over just a bit, not uh just yeah, we should go over just a bit issue 11. And I mainly want to know um is has the length of time it taken just to get from, what was it, issue 9? Yeah, 9 to 11. From start of issue 9 when Tokyo was first released, how long we had to wait for issue 10, and how little quote content it was, because people said they finished the story in like 2 to 4 hours. Was finally getting to issue 11 worth it, Wolf? And like I said, don't worry about spoiling it for me. I don't mind. Just because this video will have a spoiler tag on it. Was it well worth the wait?
Yeah, it was. As I said way earlier on, if you think of the Secret World, you have to think of the Secret World as basically a novel, and issue 11 is the end of chapter 1 of that novel, or season 1 if you want to think of it as a TV show. It has looped us back to where we started in the game, where this some kind of bomb has gone off in Tokyo, and we wake up with powers while we're sleeping, listening to TV, talking about this bomb. I mean, that's not a big spoiler. It's not a spoiler at all. That's how the game starts. The first thing you're thrown into. I'm not going to say how you get the powers or anything, because that's part of the fun. But you go through these other zones we talked about. You go to New England, you go to Egypt, you go to Transylvania, and all along the way you're learning more and more about what's going on, what this bomb has done, what the effect has been on the world that the ordinary people don't understand or don't know about. Um, and then ultimately, I guess a couple of months back, we finally got the first issue of Tokyo, which is we've looped back to the very beginning of the game, and now we're going to go and find out, okay, what's really going on. The problem was that for Funcom, not the problem for players, the problem for Funcom, the original intention was to have Tokyo as the starting zone, but then they realized it was going to be so complex, they changed their plans and moved it to the end of the chapter and had the New England as the starting zone to ease you into the game and the whole idea of that there's things going on here that are not what they seem and you have to figure things out. So anyway, issue 9 came out last summer, last fall, and that introduced us to Tokyo, and we finally got into the section in Tokyo where this bomb went off and we started learning what was going on. And because it was such a big development effort, it was the first urban zone that Funcom had done. All the other zones were kind of rural, or there weren't really complex zones. I mean, a New England town is not a complex zone of little houses. Egypt, certainly desert, is not a complex zone. Transylvania is mostly woods. So again, there was a lot of stuff they could reuse. But you get into Tokyo, and now they have to have verticality. They have sky high rises. There's buildings. There's tunnels. There's so it really taxed their development team to do it right. And I think they did a beautiful job. But they made the original decision they were going to release Tokyo in 3 issues, which was 9, 10, and 11. And for economic purposes, the company also decided instead of releasing everything in the issue, they were going to release the main issue and then these little issues they call side stories, which had a couple of quests which you don't really need to know what's going on, but add fun stuff. And that bombed. People weren't buying them. So by the time they got to issue 10, they pretty much stopped with the side stories. They just did them for issue 9. So 9 introduced us to Tokyo, got us a little idea of the players there, what's going on. 10 brought us closer to the source of where everything is happening, which is this company in game called Orochi, which is kind of like the super Microsoft of the world. They make everything. It's they have 8 subsidies that are a version of CNN called QBL. They have a company that makes computers. They have a company that does oil. They have so it's this huge company. Its headquarters is in Kaden section of Tokyo, very near where this bomb went off. So the whole game has been building to actually going into Orochi headquarters and trying to get some answers to what in hell has been going on to this point and why are these things happening. And that's what issue 11 is. Issue 11 is we finally get to go into the tower. Come on in, Chuck. We get for those who don't play Secret World, when you get there, you'll understand who Chuck is. Good old John, who calls us Chuck all the time. You finally get to go into the tower and start seeing what's going on inside this corporation, what it has to do with what's going on outside in the world. It's technically only 3 missions. There's the mission of getting into the tower itself, going through the Tokyo subway tunnels to actually get into the lobby of the tower. There's a mission where you go through 3 floors of the tower to get keys to go higher up. You basically have to, do whatever in the floor of these particular towers to get keys to go to the next level. And then there's the final mission at the top of the tower, the penthouse, where the big bosses are. Now it sounds like it's not a lot, but what they did was, now remember I said Orochi is 8 companies. That means that technically there are 8 different companies on each floor. So when you go into the tower itself and you pick the company of the first floor you're going to go to. So say you're going to go to QBL there. You're going to go to the alpha floor of QBL, which is their first floor of their version of CNN. You go through the floor, you do whatever you have to do, you get the card that lets you go take the elevator to the next floor. At that point, it's random. You don't know what company you're going to end up in on the next floor. So you could start in the CNN version, but you could next go into the place where they make computers, and that's something totally different. And then when you finish that one, you end up randomly going into the 3rd floor of an entirely different, maybe the same company, maybe an entirely different company. So while you only have to do the mission once to proceed to the penthouse to continue and complete the story, essentially, of chapter 1, there's 512 paths through this building because of the randomness. There's 8 times 8 times 8, basically. Depending, you can pick the first floor, and from that point on, you have no idea which way you're going. So you don't need to do that, but it increases the playability. And there's wonderful little Easter eggs and little side things in each floor that make you want to go back because you learn something different about this company. You learn who were the good guys, who were the bad guys, who were just plain nuts. And we've encountered a lot of just wacko nuts.
Yeah.
Thinking of the wonderful Dr. Klein. Well, I have no words. You find out, that there's these kind of people are inside his headquarters, of course, because they were his bosses. And there's some that are, friendly. There's some that are dead. There's some that are, turned into monsters. But there's all kinds of different things that you encounter in this building, and that really increases the playability. So to just say it's 3 missions, well, technically, yeah. And if you really press, you can get through it in about 3 hours, 2-3 hours. But that's not Secret World. Secret World is not a rush to the top, and it's not a rush to finish the story. It's a story that you contemplate. It's like reading a novel. You want to go through it. You want to see all the nuances. You want to see, well, okay, they're not bad people. They're good people with bad intentions, or they're good people who had what they thought was a good idea at the time and turned out not to be. It seemed like the right idea at the time, and it just blew up in their faces. The famous phrase is "the road to hell is paved with good intentions." Well, that's exactly what this is. There's a lot of good intentions that just go horribly wrong. And the fun part of the game is that you want to learn that. You want to see, these people are not, other than the actual monsters, the people behind this stuff are not monsters. They have their reasons for doing with this. You may not agree with their reasons. You may think they're off their rocker, but they have their very valid reasons for doing things, and that's the fun of it, finding that out.
Well, I can't wait till I get issue 11. Uh, Give me that look, Abby. So something about issue 11 that Harle told Abby not to spoil for me, but I've already seen it on accident because I just happened to look over from whatever I was doing. Is some sort of ability you get. All I know is suddenly she had wings. So what's all that about?
Yeah, you get at the end of issue 11, you get what's called the ultimate ability, and it plays into the story. Um, at the end of each subchapter in Secret World, when you finish the New England part, you go into this kind of a dream, and you're faced with a choice. I won't say what the choice is, just not spoil it for other people, but you're faced with a choice between one side or the other. And this happens 3 times. It happens at the end of New England, it happens at the end of Egypt, it happens at the end of Transylvania. So by this point, you've built up 3 choices, and that means you could have had a bunch of different ways. At the very end of chapter 11, those choices come back to haunt you. And the way they come back to haunt you in a way, it's like a be careful what you wish for, is you've now become more. You're not just this random schlub who had got this ability at the beginning of the game and spent however long it took you to get through the game trying to figure out what was going on, while having a handler in your faction who basically kept you in the dark and fed you bullshit. And they thought you were a mushroom, and they only told you things on a need-to-know basis. Now all of a sudden the tables have turned, and this other group, I won't even say what they are, but this other group that are major players in a story that you've only had glimpses of at this point, come along and say, "Bing, you are now have new powers. You are now more than what they thought you were, based on the choices you made." Yeah, you get wings. You get what's called an ultimate ability, and it is basically a nuke from space. It's the best way I can describe it. It's a single blast. They implemented it very well. That it's not always active. You have to build up. You have to build up a reservoir to do it, and this reservoir builds up as you fight. So, but it takes about 500 attacks or so to build up the reservoir. So you could use this one ability. You can't use it a group of people can't use it to nuke a boss in a dungeon, because the rule of the ability is that a mob can only be affected by it once every 10 minutes. So you can't go into a dungeon and all 5 of us nuke a boss, because you only be affected by one of them, and the other 4 wasted our skill. So you have to be very judicious about when you use it. On the other hand, if there's a free world boss that you've had trouble with, it's really fun to nuke him. If he's giving you a hard time, you just go, whoop, oh look, he's dead. But yeah, and it's going to play in. It's going to play into the future of the story as we get into chapter 2 and beyond. That we are now something beyond what we've been, and we have this new ability that I mean, the wings it's a beautiful effect. I mean, if you say you've seen it, it's a lovely effect. And the color, the abilities are, so you get there's 3 versions of it. There's 3 colors based on the choices you made. If you went all one side, you get gold wings. If you went all the other side, you get black wings. If you go something in the middle, you get blue wings, which is what my character has, what Wolffriend has. Because
I got her blue wings too.
Yeah, and it's they all do the same thing but slightly different ways. Like I think the gold wings do the heal first, heal you first, and then then you do it at the attack, which is the attack is for like 30k in one blast.
Whoa!
Yeah, it's a huge attack. And then it leaves a thing on the ground that basically ticks. It's basically a hit over time for anybody that's still standing in it. The Blackwing version does the attack first and then heals you, and the Blue Wing version is a hot. Basically, it does it 10k hits while it hits you, heals you, hits you, heals you, hits you, heals you. So basically, the end damage is the same. They're just slightly different in how they implement it.
That's interesting. I like that our choices finally have a quote consequence.
Yeah, and they will. The developers. There was a really good. There's a cabal similar to TAL, a group similar to TAL in the game called Otter, that recently did a run through of the issue 11 with the lead writer and the lead developer from the Secret World, and they dropped a little tidbits here and there without giving a lot of spoilers to us, the players. But this is not the only version of the ultimate ability we're going to get. As the game progresses, they've already have it planned out to issue 26 or 28. So we know there's still we're in for the long haul in the story. This ability will change. There'll be variations on it. This is just the first implementation of it, and it will continue to evolve and variations of it as we go through the game in the future.
Well, at least we have something to look forward to.
Well, the next release, it'll be kind of a point release on issue 11. There has been work. They've been working on a new dungeon, which will be the first new one since the game started, basically, which is based in Tokyo. In the Irachi Tower in particular, I think it's going to be the basement or something, and ultimately a new raid. And that there is speculation, of course, that we got this ability because it will come into play in the dungeon, in the new dungeon, that it will be something that, as well as coordinating what we're all doing, the raid group, dungeon groups of 5 people in the Secret World, and there's some coordination of what you have to do, so we all make sure our roles are right, and somebody doesn't do something stupid, which we usually do anyway. But there'll be some coordination in who fires an ability when and when it's used. So it could be interesting, and I'm looking forward to. I mean, I came into the game. You were my mentor on all the dungeons because you had done them all by the time I got to the point where I could do them. So basically, I tagged along, and you taught me everything I know about the dungeons, and that's part of the reason I joined the Teddy Bear Corps to pass it along to other people. But we're all going to go into this blind. It's going to be a new dungeon, new raid that none of us have experienced before. There's no guides out there. There's no rules. We're going to have to learn as we do it, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's exciting to figure out our own mechanics, figure out how it works.
We're going to die a lot.
Yeah.
But we come back. That's the fun thing of the game. We come back.
So, do you have any more on issue 11 before we move on to the next thing?
The only thing I can say is that it really, It's like anything else. It's very funny. There was somebody on the newcomers board yesterday in the official forum said, I've just hit New England and I have questions, and the only way I could answer them is, welcome to the club. Every question that gets answered is going to have, 5 more questions raised as you go through the game, which is part of the beauty of it. Well, we got answers to things that we've been wondering about in issue 11, but we probably got 15 questions for every answer we got now, and it just made me really fall in love with this game even more. That okay, we've got these answers, but now okay, what the hell? Bring on issue 12, bring on issue 13. I want to know what's happening. I want to see the next season. I want to see what's going on. You've let this on a little bit of a cliffhanger. Yeah, come on, we're ready for the next one. So yeah, that anybody that has played the game up to that point really has to get through 11. It's very satisfying.
Okay. Well, speaking of next installments in games, at the time of this recording, I think yesterday, Witcher 3 was released, right? Or was it the day before?
Last night, 9 p.m., it officially went live on my system. I had a pre-order. I bought a new laptop, and Witcher 3 came along with it as a free pre-order. And I guess that was midnight Poland time, because the company that makes The Witcher is Polish. So at midnight Poland time, which was 9 o'clock East Coast time, it went live. So yeah, it was yesterday.
Okay, and are you still on the first one, or have you gone to the second one now?
I am still in the first one. Like I said, I had been into computer games way back when, but it was mostly text adventure, and I spent a long time getting really involved in the Sims, like Sims 1, Sims 2, uh, and the idea of a role-playing game intrigued me. And I tried the first Witcher not long after it first came out. I guess it was about 2007, 2008. And I just hit a brick wall. I could not, as much as I was enjoying it, I just could not progress in the game. I just kept dying, got frustrating, and put it on the shelf. Uh, and kind of forgot about role playing games until Dragon Age came out, and that intrigued me, and I gave that a try, and I fell in love with the whole Dragon Age franchise. I've played all 3 of them. Mass Effect, I got into those, but I was kind of watching what was going on with Witcher. I never played 2, but the fact that I got a free copy of 3, I said, "What the hell? Let me check it out." And it turns out that to go along with the release of 3, that GOG, whatever it is, the company that sells the game, had 1 and 2 for $1.99 and $2.99 respectively. That's $2.99, $1.99. I said, "Oh, what the hell? It's a chance to try it again." So I got 1 and 2, and I got back into 1. And interestingly enough, it kind of ties back into our previous discussion, what you're saying about the secret world teaching you things about mechanics and stuff. I have found playing The Witcher a lot easier this time because of things I learned in the secret world about how to build things. Dodging is a big thing in the secret world, and that was my downfall when I played The Witcher the first time. Is dodging and rolling and getting out of the way of attacks, and it's just like a piece of cake now because I do it all the time in the secret world. So I'm well past where I was. I haven't finished chapter 2 of the game yet, but I'm really, really enjoying it and looking forward to playing it through.
Oh yeah, Witcher was like I think I mentioned on the forums, with the exception of the Vampire the Masquerade, Witcher is the only other what is it, RPG or game I said where I've actually enjoyed going through and doing every tiny little side quest. Just pick up even like the kill a monster ones, because you just pick those up right in the beginning and then eventually you have them done while you're doing the regular quest. And like it's such an involved world. The developers CD Projekt Red are really good at making their own world. So you said you're in chapter 2, so I won't talk about anything past
Yeah.
chapter 2. Okay. I will say that the
Oh, I mean,
combat
you could spoil me a little bit. I mean, I've been looking at facts and guides and stuff, so I have a little idea what's going on. I don't know the ultimate end game. I'm trying to avoid that, but I do have a little bit idea what the stakes are here.
well, in terms of mechanics, dodging becomes easier and combat, well, I'm not gonna say combat's easier. Combat is much different in the second one. Like the style
I've
that
read that. Yeah, I've read that.
to give a bit of background, the style that you know now, strong, fast group, and the two different weapons, still works on monsters and humans, and silver works on, still works on animals and humans, and silver works on monsters and ghosts. And I guess you can call them monsters, but the insect creatures, the plants are insects, as they're known as insectoids. Um, and it's basically just click an enemy and press click again at the right moment to keep doing the combo. I mean, it gets a little bit more involved in that, like doing a group stance on a fast enemy to also do damage to everyone around you, switching your stances while you're fighting so you can quickly move on to the next enemy, or etc. etc. Focus on an enemy that's a bit stronger and does a bit more damage to you. But I will say, as janky and difficult as The Witcher 2 as The Witcher can be, it gets a lot harder in The Witcher 2, especially in the beginning, but it's less janky. Instead of having all that, you have a fast attack and a strong attack still. But instead of like aiming at something and just clicking at the right moment, instead it's more like a conventional. You can attack and you can just press. You can alternate and combo. There's no special combos. You just alternate, and the combos happen on their own. But you're not stuck there like in RTS where you're just targeting and stuck attacking. You can switch targets a lot faster. You can use a strong attack on everything or a fast attack on everything. But let's just say that it's a lot harder. Most of the strategies I have when I'm fighting, especially when I'm in a group, is dodge in, attack, dodge out, hit and go, run in, run out. Because it's a lot harder. It's actually getting slightly easier when you get more gear, as it should be, but I'm still in the first area. It's just I also read that they intentionally made it really hard in the beginning and it's supposed to ease up slightly as you go along. But you know the Quen spell, right? And have you gotten all the signs? You know the end of chapter 2?
I don't have them all, but I have read all. I have read what they are. So yeah, I know what the spells are. Right, at this point, I only have the first two, the fire one and the knockdown one. I forget what the name of it is.
Okay, well, you can get the rest of them in chapter 2. I mean, I'm sure you read what they are, so at some point doing a side quest or something, you'll be able to just grab them. And even if you don't use them, it's worth grabbing them all. But the Quen sign is basically a shield until you attack or do an action. And while that doesn't
Right,
seem
right,
that
yeah.
good, and I rarely have ever used it, but it's mainly good for if you need to set down a Yurden, or which is you place down a trap, or if you need to drink a potion, or you need to get away. You activate the spell, and then you drink a potion so you can heal or get more parry, whatever. And the second game, a lot of fights, I need to use Quen. It's no longer until you use an action. It lasts about 30 to 40 seconds. I think it's 40 seconds. While it's active, you can't regenerate Vigor, which is basically endurance from the first game. And it works differently. Instead of having that endurance bar, instead you have charges. And I think they depend. I forget how I got it up. It was either armor or a stat, but since I'm still in the beginning, I think it was an armor that I wore. And basically, right now I have 3 spell uses, essentially. And while Quine's up, you can take like certain amount of damage before it disappears, but it's usually one hit because on dark mode everything hits really hard. But you can attack. So basically, if I don't want to die in 3 hits, or if you get backstab, until you get an ability that lowers the backstab by 100%, but even then it does 100% more damage. Backstabs against you, anyone attacking your back does 200% damage. So it's pretty much I have coin up at all times, just in case I don't dodge out of the way in time, or if I get hit in the back, and which will mean instant death for me. Um, I mean, it could be a bit hard, but I like it. I like the harder modes because it makes alchemy and potions more essential, and I like that little extra aspect. Instead of it becoming like grit strengthening through everything, you actually have to prepare and strategize, sort of like it's a bit more pre-preparation, but it kind of gives me that technicality I have enjoyed from Secret World. But but yeah, so the combat's definitely a lot different. Um, playing the first one and playing the second one definitely got me much more excited for the Witcher 3. And like you, I first played The Witcher like when it was on sale shortly after it came out, 2007. And well, there was a time when something happened with like a card I had, and even though the charges were still there, Steam thought it didn't go through. For a lot of games, I had to get a new card afterwards, and it took away 20 games from me and a few games I gifted to others, and The Witcher was one of those games. So, like, I had already stopped playing it at any rate, and I didn't deem it worth rebuying, but I still had The Witcher 2 Enhanced Edition. Um, so when it went on sale, like that sale that you mentioned on Steam, and it was only like $1.50, I was like, okay, I'm on top of that. Got it because Har recommended it, and usually when Har recommends a game for me, he knows what games I really like. So usually when he recommends a game to me, um, like not in general, but to me, that I usually go for because I usually love it. And so I was like, okay, if Har says it's good and he says that I would love it, then I am going to try it. He did mention that I could get away with just playing The Witcher 2 because, I mean, I'm glad I played The Witcher 1 because there's lots of cool references to the first one when you import your save. And you even get, I think it's because it's the enhanced edition, but there is an armor and there's an armor, there's a sword, a silver sword, and there's two steel swords that are named that you can get that would be better than the swords you can actually create. And I mean, while you're looking up guides, I would actually look up if you want. I'll give you the names after this so you can look up what they are because those swords and that armor, when I imported my save, all three swords and my armor carried over to The Witcher 2. I mean, I've already replaced them, right? I just now, after playing hours of doing things to gain gold, I've just now finally replaced all my armor and my swords. But I thought it was really cool that armor actually and weapons actually imported. Now,
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't realize it did that. I knew they imported stuff from the previous game, like decisions you made and whatnot. So there's some continuity in the world, which is kind of cool. I mean, Dragon Age does that, but you're not playing the same character
yeah,
through the three stories. Whereas here you are playing the same character,
you're
so it's
Geralt
really,
all the way
I guess,
through.
nice that you have a history. Yeah, but I didn't realize that even the weapons and everything you earned in the previous game carried over. So you're starting at pretty much at least. Maybe not skill wise, but at least, gear wise at the same level. That's neat.
Yeah, I mean, you have the same spells because you've by that point, no matter what you've the default is you've gotten all the spells. They may not be as powerful. Actually, they're quite different because there's you know how Ard and Igni are like kind of a cone in front of you? Well, I think you need to actually level them up twice, level up a certain skill in the skill trees. The skill tree is also much different, but thankfully our good friend Harley Quinn 2008, whatever his name is, that did the talent analysis from the first game, also made a talent analysis for the second game. So while I'm more comfortable with the Witcher series in general, I still look up before I level up something just to see like it's mainly just because like it's good because someone else has played the game and they can actually tell us well this description says that and while it may say awesome, while it might sound awesome, we all know from experience that descriptions don't always do what they say they will, so it's nice. But one other mechanic from The Witcher 2 that I really enjoy. If this is in dark mode, and I think insane mode only, I don't play insane mode because that's hardcore. Insane mode is basically the same difficulty as dark mode, but it's Iron Man like. So basically, as soon as you die, that's it. You can't reload to a previous save or anything. Whereas dark mode is same difficulty, but you can save it and reload and continue the game without having to start over. But there's a certain
Nightmare mode, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a certain armor in Chapter 1 that I spent hours and hours farming gold to not only because I had to get the diagrams, which cost more money than making them, get the diagram, buy all the materials, and then finally make the things, right? And the set consists of a steel and silver sword, and unlike the first one, you have your armor, gauntlets, boots, and trousers. So it's more a conventional set of armor. There's no helmet, of course. Geralt's too cool for that.
Right.
But
Well, the first one, the armor is just you can change your chest, right? There's no
yeah,
other
and
armor, just chest. You know, that you
with
can
the
change.
exception of the Raven armor, which is the armor you can get that carries over, and it's actually different depending on the choices you make throughout the game, which is neat. But with the exception of that armor you get in Chapter 2, and you also have a chance to get it in Chapter 3, because Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 are dealt in Fanime. Just that you can actually go. I mean, obviously the next area gets you to the next area, but you can still go to Temple Quarter and actually go back and forth, which is I really like that. I mean, you can't go back to the outskirts because I don't know why, because you're in quarantine, I guess. But you can still go.
No, isn't everybody pretty much dead there too?
Yeah.
Well, depending on the
So
choice
I
you
guess
made,
you made
yeah.
the same choice I did, defended the witch. But yeah, but at any rate, the the whole set of armor, right? But it's dark mode, so there's a catch. This armor is really good. The armor is really good. The boots, trousers, and gauntlets are not so good. They're not much better. They're slightly better than what you would normally get. The two swords definitely replace the swords and the armor that you import from the first save. But um, the thing about that is, while the trousers, gauntlets, and boots aren't as really that much of an upgrade, and you might deem it like unnecessary gold spent to replace it. There are two effects to the Blasphemer armor, along with the great armor that you get and the great damage you get from the two swords, and the secondary effect like bleeding or whatever. Um, when you attack, you get lifesteal, which is a big thing because unlike in the first game where you can drink potions mid-combat, you have to meditate and then drink potions. You can no longer drink your potions in mid-fight, which is hardcore because that means a lot more preparation. Because you can throw bombs, you can set down traps while in the fight, but you're not able to drink potions anymore. So like if you're getting into a hectic fight, there's no more White Rafford concoction to get you up while you're trying to drink a swallow so you can get some regeneration, etc., etc.
That's interesting because that's actually closer to the original stories. I don't know if you've ever read any of the original Witcher stories, but they even kind of hint at it in the beginning of the first thing where you see Geralt take a potion and then meditate before he goes out and
Oh,
attacks that girl who became a
yeah.
monster. But they don't use that mechanic in the game, so it sounds like they actually added that mechanic in the second game because that's kind of the way things work in the books. I picked up the first book uh, that was been translated in English and started reading it, and that's pretty much the way it works in the books. He has to, take a potion. He has to kind of prepare for it, take the potion before he goes into a fight. So yeah, it sounds like they kind of went back to the original concept, and I'm not sure if they do that in the third. I haven't really read that far into the third,
That's
and
really neat.
I don't know which one they
That's,
carry. Yeah,
I like that. I mean, I like that they have to meditate because it makes a lot more uh preparation and strategy. And if it's with the book, it actually makes sense because there's harmful toxins that I guess your body needs to dissolve the toxins before it can take the uh good effects in, I guess you could say, the effects that you want before you go to battle. But at any rate, this the sword or even just wearing the armor, I think, gives you life stealing every time you attack, which is a big thing now. With the exception of, all those use and gauntlets, trousers, and boots you thought were useless. If you're only wearing one part of it's called the blasphemous armor because the lore behind it is someone. There were three brothers, and they all crafted armor that was really, really good. And the blasphemer was a coward, and he ditched his ideals and ditched his brothers, which made him a coward and a blasphemer, and he got a curse that was going to kill him. But since his armor was invincible, as long as he wore every piece of the armor, um, he was fine. When he finally lost the gauntlet, that's when the curse took him and died. Same thing, if you're not wearing every piece of the armor, as soon as you draw a sword, you continuously lose health. So I like that they have this really powerful armor and sword, but if you're not wearing all pieces of the armor, you're gonna die when you pull out your weapon.
That's
And
wild. So instead of a set bonus, you have a set minus. Don't wear the whole
yeah,
set; it'll kill you. Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
and this is only in dark mode. So it's only in dark mode. So I really like the balance on that. It's really neat, and I hope they have stuff like that in Witcher 3. But another thing that's neat is, well, I'm sure you've noticed by now that when it rains, NPCs notice because they duck in. They duck. It's always funny when it starts raining when you're in like a town square or something, and everyone just starts scrambling around trying to get to cover.
Yeah, I've
Well,
seen that. But they complain about the rain. Or yeah, I mean, it's I regret not getting back into it, years ago. But I mean, the original Dragon Age kind of salvaged me for this kind of game. So I'm happy to get back in it again. And I think part of the thing years ago too is much slower computers. Things didn't happen as fast. I mean, the fast computers we have now. I
yeah,
think we're catching up to the games is what's happening.
yeah, the
There were a lot.
games were ahead of their time.
Yeah, so we're catching up to them now with the power of the computers, and it is fun to just kind of walk around, like I said, just look at the environment, see the environment. Again, the same kind of feeling I got in TSW, but there's things that are happening that have nothing to do with us. You know,
Yeah, it's just in a super involved world. Like CD Projekt Red's really good at that. In the second game, though, and the third game is too, whether it actually affects some of your abilities. Like, I think you can upgrade your Quinn to do damage to people attack, and I guess it's an electrical based attack because if it's raining, they'll take more damage. But that's just one of the little things. Carl mentioned that in the third one that their goal is, and I guess we'll find out ourselves when we play it, is to make a world that operates on its own. Now, I don't know what that'll mean for our meditating anymore because I'm sure you found I think there's only one or two quests in Witcher 1 that are actually affected by, like, as soon as you get them, you need to finish them within the time given to you or you will fail them. And there's only one or two quests like that. For the Wesley quest, even when it says, oh, meet me tomorrow at noon, you could meditate for like 3 days and it won't affect it. So I wonder and it's sort of the same in The Witcher 2. I meditating to drink potions and to level up no longer gets rid of time anymore. You can choose to go to a set time, like an hour. So you know how when you do, like, say if you leveled up and made a potion, that would be 2 hours added to you in The Witcher 1. Now, no
right.
time is added to you. You can choose whether or not you want to add time and then meditate. I think below dark mode, or maybe it's below in hard mode, you can actually level up without meditating by pressing the C, but up above that you have to meditate, which makes sense. But anyways, so I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't, I've been trying to studiously avoid a lot of, spoilers. Obviously, a lot don't exist yet because people haven't had the game. But looking at the videos for 3, it does look like meditation is still, I mean, assuming that the videos are somewhat accurate of the gameplay, it looks like the meditate before fighting is still there. They carried that over from 2. What's interesting though that I've read um, at least the reviews of the game, which the non-spoiler reviews, uh, and a lot of them say that it's a much more open world. I mean, even though it's a fairly open world and you don't have to do things too linearly, there at least in Witcher 1 is a somewhat linear story, and I understand 2 is somewhat the same. 3 is completely open world, and you can wander around and do things and go back there 3 or 4 days later and see the consequences of what you did. It will change the world behind you. And I think that's going to be an interesting mechanic to see.
Yeah, it's really neat because things are always happening everywhere, apparently, in that world, whether or not you're there. Like I was mentioning, there could be people, travelers that maybe if you got there 2 days, maybe if you got there, you'd meet them and you say hi, and then a vampire would appear and you kill him. Or if you arrive 2 days later, you'll just find their bodies dead there because you weren't there when they were passing by.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that kind of stuff.
that's like that's pretty awesome to and if this is the kind of games, they've only released 3 games, which is all 3 of these games. But if this is the kind of stuff they're able to pull off, it actually makes me really excited for Cyberpunk 2077, which they're working with, I forgot its name. It's, who made it? Well, it was based off the role-playing game, Cyberpunk 2020. It was made by Mike Pondsmith. They're working with Mike Pondsmith to turn that old, like, based around the 1980s type game with cybernetics and stuff like that. They're turning it into more of a in the future game with cybernetics and stuff like that. Cyberpunk
These
game.
the same people, the CD
It's
project.
the same studio. It's CD
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Project Red. It's the same studio, not necessarily the same developers, because I think that they're like I think they're working on it like right now. So there's obviously people working on The Witcher 3, but if it's the same studio, I'm not worried because they can always go back and forth. Hey, what do you think about this? Blah blah, and everyone can be involved one way or another with ideas, whether or not they're officially working on it. So
Well, I did read somewhere that they don't intend to do a Witcher 4. Of course, that could change, but the plan was that Witcher 3 would end the story. It would be like a trilogy. So they may very well have taken whatever developers worked on 3 and left a skeleton crew behind to do any bug fixing and whatnot and moved them over to this new game.
that would be awesome because Harle and I, we love, like, well, me especially, obviously, as my fascination with robots, I love cyberpunk stuff, and cannot wait. Um, because he showed me a trailer for Deus Ex, whatever the newest one that's going to be coming out. I was like, wow, that looks pretty cool. Definitely, the graphics look better than the second one, and I hope it plays better than the second one. Because while I like the second one, I couldn't even finish it because I just got burnt out slash bored with it. So I had Harle tell me the end. But then it shows me the trailer for Cyberpunk 2077. And there was no, I mean, neither one was gameplay trailer, but the one with Deus Ex was like he was kicking people's butt and fighting. And the Cyberpunk 2077, all you see is someone shooting a bullet at a lady with some cybernetic enhancements on her, and it looks like she's got like blades sticking out of like her arms as she's like sitting like sitting back on her knees on the ground covered in blood, and she's just sitting there sort of looking either solemn or sad, and all you see is in slow motion some people shooting a gun at her and the bullet's just breaking on her face. And for some reason, I found that trailer to make me a lot more excited for 2077 than the Deus Ex made me for the new one. So, and it's also the fact that it's being worked on by CD Projekt Red, which I mean, if any of their past games, Witcher to Witcher 3, are an example, it'll be great, really good.
That sounds interesting. You have to send me a link to that stuff. I'd like to check it out.
Yeah, I'll probably
I'm not a big cyberpunk stuff, but I'm always looking for something new to keep me occupied, especially since my real retirement is approaching very rapidly, and I'll have a lot more time to play
yeah,
games.
and apparently it's supposed to be an open world RPG too. So if it's anything like The Witcher 3, it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the three, and it'll take me a while to get through it. I mean, I enjoyed Dragon Age 3 Inquisition, but it unlike one, two juries out, but unlike one, it doesn't have a lot of replayability. I mean, you could play through it two or three times with different characters just to see some different results, but after that, there's almost no point in playing it again. The Witcher strikes me that it's the kind of game you could play through at least twice or three times just to make different decisions to see what happens down the road. Um, kind of like that. The Mass Effect was kind of like that too. You
Yeah.
could make decisions that have major effects in the following games, whereas Dragon Age, they didn't really do that well, so I don't know. I think it's just the idea of following the same character through three games that really intrigues me. Um, it's almost like more like an MMO type of thing where you are the character and you go through the whole story, rather than it's the same world but there's different characters. I mean, there's pluses and minuses of both approaches.
Yeah, I mean, some people don't want to play it because of the lack of pre-made, and the combat is a bit janky in the first one. But I mean that makes sense because well, making your own character has much appeal to it. Also, he's a bit better looking in the second one. Well, I say a lot better looking in the second one, but Geralt is kind of like ugly to look at in the first one, and that can throw people off too. I know I have a friend who's just like, I never want to look at Geralt's face. It's just like,
Yeah.
and it's really funny. But I don't know if they could have pulled off the dynamics of the world if it was a pre-made character as well, because somehow, with a pre-made character, it feels like the game would be less personal than it is when you're playing Geralt, and you don't have a lot less consequence choices. Because you're not just in a way. I mean, it made it seem like this in the first one. I don't actually know, but in the first one, it makes it seem like, in a way, you're not just making choices that have consequences in the future. The choices you make are also as a player, in the video game, I mean, not as Geralt, but as the choices you make as a player seem to be making your memories or your past seems to influence what your past is ultimately going to be. But
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I was just thinking that way you were saying it. The advantage to playing a pre-made playing a particular character, which I guess the Mass Effect series also had to a certain extent, is that you do have a past. There's people in the game. You're not a cipher. I mean, the one of the strange parts of the Dragon Age thing was, whenever you enter the game, you're a cipher. Nobody knows you. You're just some schlub who rises to greatness for whatever reason. At least in the Mass Effect games, you had some knowledge. People knew who you were. You're Captain Shepard. And I like the idea that it really intrigues me in uh, Witcher One, that even though you know apparently, and of course I think part of solving this is part of the whole game, but you've been missing for 5 years and everybody thought you were dead and you come back with no memory. But people remember you. People know you. And from a personal point of view, how could I not like a character whose nickname is the White Wolf? But
yeah,
but it is the idea that you're in a world where people have heard of you. I mean, even characters that you have your friends, you have people that are obviously not real fond of you for whatever reason. But even your reputation precedes you even with characters who you haven't met yet. Oh, you're the White Wolf. Oh, you're Geralt. Yeah, I've heard of you. You're the butcher of something, or the whatever. And it's like you have a history, which is a really intriguing and fun part of the whole thing, combined with the fact that you don't really know this history and you're learning it as you go through the game by kind of getting
yeah.
your memories back. It's a really intriguing concept, and partly why I tried the game a bunch of years ago and why I'm much happier now that I'm actually getting into it and can play it and not constantly die and bang my head up against a wall.
Yeah, it's really enjoyable. It's funny that you mentioned the butcher, like the butcher of the Oscars. It was actually like because I imported my save, and they have references to the first game, as I said in there. I think I don't think a lot of I don't think I think most of the stuff you did in Witcher 1 is just gonna be mostly references to the second one, but it's still neat because it ties the world together. But someone did call me the Butcher of the Outskirts, and it wasn't even someone I could talk to. It was I believe it was a little girl just running around in some random in a village. Can't talk to her. She was just one of many children that, like, follow you around until you leave the village.
Oh
She was
yeah, I
like,
knew
"Hey,
them.
aren't
Yeah.
you the butcher of the outskirts? You don't scare me." And I was like, "Whoa, that's that's quite a way to reference it because that's something you might never even see unless you just go by that little girl at that time where her randomized dialogue just happens to bring it up." And it's like, wow, that's really neat. Just little things like that that make the world more authentic.
And the funny thing is, I mentioned, I just started reading the Witcher books. I think there's a lot of them, but only 5 have been translated into English at this point. And the very first one is actually kind of a collection of short stories about Geralt that um, are tied together uh, by an overarching thing that ties it together. And the story of what happened there, where he got that nickname, where he got called the Butcher, is one of the stories in that book. So I mean, it's taken from the books, but it's a thing of how rumors start. If you read the story and see what really happened, he's no butcher. But of course, that's the reputation that
Yeah.
precedes him. I mean, it was what he did was very legitimate, but yeah, he did kill a bunch of people, but he was attacked,
Yeah.
and he defended himself. But of course, he becomes the butcher of, and it was really interesting, like you said, seeing it in a Witcher 1, people calling him that. Uh, With 5, 6 years on, he's still got that reputation of being the butcher of. I can't pronounce the name of the town, but yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The it's funny talking about save imports. Obviously, they couldn't make you start with a bunch of gold and all the stuff you had on you, so they had just the armor and the swords. But it makes me wonder because by the time I beat the game, I was no longer really buying things anymore, right? Uh, you don't have to buy those weapons and the armor that you get. You can they're quests. You do certain things. I mean, that's why I said I'll give you the names later so you can look up how to get them because a couple of them are actually situational, as in you have to do a quest correctly or in a certain way to get that item. Um, but anyways, I had at least 12,000 gold before when I beat the game. So when I got to the second game and I have like no gold, it's like, damn, girl, what are you spending everything on? You even got 8,000 gold on top of that from the king. What are you doing?
Yeah, gold is very precious. I think that's another thing I like about it. Is that you're not um, swimming in wealth. I mean, you're actually working for a living, and you have to be careful how you spend your money, um, because there's books you have to buy. There's ingredients you have to buy that you can't find out there in the world, and you have to find ways to earn money above and beyond doing missions. I've gotten real fond of boxing, a good way to earn a few
Oh
coins.
yeah.
But yeah, I look at that. You talk about the armor in the first game. It's 5,000 coins. It's going to take a long time to afford that, and I was glad to hear you say that you can go back there and eventually get it, because I know by the time I finish chapter 2, I'm not going to have that much coins to go back and buy that armor.
Yeah, I just went to Taller. I played poker with him, reloading and saving until I had like 5,300 so that I'd have enough to play poker some more if I needed anything else. Basically, once I was like, huh, even though this is completely RNG based, because the developers actually made poker stacked greatly against you because they were like, oh, well, people are going to farm it anyways by reloading a save if they lose, so we'll just make it harder to win. But it still gets you a good amount of coin. But if you want to do it like, without using that exploit, boxing is definitely the way to go. Or farming, you can farm your drowners and drown heads, and they drop something called Ganeth acid, which the material is something you can find often enough, and it sells for like 15 each, which actually adds up. But at any rate, eventually you do get to a point where you stop spending money. And the second one, um, books. In terms of books, you no longer need to read about herbs, which is good. you don't have to read about herbs, and I don't think you need to read about monsters in order to collect the ingredients you need from them. But instead, those notice boards, they're no longer kill 10 of this. There it's more about actually ending the infestation itself. And I was after I did the notice boards, like, and I was running around outside, the only people I encountered were bandits. So you actually do end the infestation. So what I was doing before I finished uh thing is I was basically farming the monsters that spawn from the things that I had to get rid of before I would do the thing that would make them leave forever, and just selling all their materials. And it was actually a good way to make money because in some of them spawn a lot, but still, yeah, you're still not rich. It took hours to raise. I think uh at the end of it all, it cost roughly 3,000 to buy all the armor, diagrams, materials, because some of the materials would have taken too long to like make it myself, so I just outright bought them. And then to pay for the crafting of the armor and swords themselves. So you're definitely still not rich. It requires hard witcher work to get that money, money, money. The poker, all the people I play poker against, I don't make more than 20 or 25 at most from them anymore. The boxing, I think it's gonna be an option at every town, but you know how you defeat one particular fighter in the first one, and then in the next chapter you go to an end and there's the next fighter, and it's probably gonna continue like that throughout the whole game. I would recommend doing that, which you probably already are because that's how you make money. Um, but I would
Yeah.
definitely recommend doing that. Um, just because completing that actually enables you to get one of the swords that imports you over to the second game, because the last guy you fight, you knock his tooth out, and you give his tooth to a certain guy, a certain creepy little dwarf who collects teeth, and he'll give you the Mahackman silver sword, or no, steel sword, which does 100% more damage. Um, so actually, you can just get that sword and then carry over, and just
Cool.
but yeah, in this one it's different. While you're fighting in the first inn and you're beating up the drunkards, someone's like, "Hey, you're too good for these drunken riffraff," and he says, "Meet me at the inn at this time, and I'll take you to a tournament." And the journey log says you can meet him in front of inns in the evening. So I'm guessing the new thing is going to be meeting this guy in front of the ends of new towns you see, and then he'll take you to a tournament, or maybe there'll be a guy like that in every chapter or town you go to. But the fighting is definitely different because it's quick time events. Um, it's definitely improved upon the first Witcher. I really like the combat and everything in the first Witcher. And I could definitely, even after playing the improved gameplay of The Witcher 2, I could definitely go back and still play The Witcher 1 because it was just a good game, and it was janky but lovably so. But The Witcher 2 has definitely taken The Witcher and done what sequels are supposed to, improve on the game and do better than the game before it. So I really like that fact, and it just gives me hope for that The Witcher 3 will take everything from the first two games and greatly improve it and just throw us into this open world RPG.
Kind of sounds, from what I've read of the reviews, it sounds like it does that. I mean, I guess we'll see when people actually get into it. There'll always be naysayers, but I think from what I've been seeing so far, that it looks like they have a winner there.
It's definitely game of the year material.
Yeah, I mean, it every day I've been looking at some of the videos and stuff, and it looks beautiful. It just looks like a beautiful game. I haven't fired it up yet, but I'm sure the graphics being, have caught up with the technology today. So I mean, it just looks great. I mean, one of the little things that they talk about first on is that apparently in The Witcher 2, 3, Geralt's beard grows and you could shave and it grows back over a couple of days. I mean, Just think about that. I
That's-
mean, that just a little touch like that is something I've never seen in a game where the character's appearance actually changes as time goes on, like a real
is
person.
awesome. That is wonderful. It's gonna be a wonderful game. I can't wait till I get it. It's a bit too expensive for me right now, so I gotta wait till it goes down in price.
Yeah, like I said, I got fortunate. I needed a new laptop, a new computer, and a free copy came with it.
Yeah,
So
Harle.
I lucked out that
A
way.
friend of
But
ours, FT, got that too when he got a graphics card. Harle was not so lucky. He got Dragon Age Inquisition. Oh,
well,
I
it's
mean,
not a
he
bad
enjoyed
game.
it.
Inquisition's not a
I'm just
bad
saying
game,
he
but it's
would have
not,
rathered The Witcher 3.
Yeah.
But he
No. So I enjoyed Inquisition. I played. I took a break from TSW earlier this year for about a month or two and just played nothing but Inquisition for the month. But it loses its replayability after a while. I enjoyed it, but we'll see what they do next.
Yeah. So, seems like a good time to wrap it up. But there's one more thing that I think we should talk about that really embodies what one of the better things of the Witcher series is the fact that it seems that every choice, no matter how little, seems to have consequences you wouldn't expect. And and the fact that it's not wrong or right most of the time. Most of the time it's just a choice you have to make and you have to decide from. Like the whole Butcher of the Outskirts thing. Um you were choosing between you weren't necessarily even then you weren't necessarily choosing between Abigail and the townspeople. You could choose to just give her up to the townspeople, right? But you were taking the facts and you were doing what you could with them, and the choice you made out of that inevitably led one way or another. And it's just so interesting how the major choices and even some of the little choices, uh,
Yeah, there's a point in chapter 2 where depending on how you treat a certain character, other characters stop
yeah,
talking to you. The blacksmith thing. You've got 2 blacksmiths that you have available when you first enter the temple quarter, but depending on which way you go on one quest, one of them will stop talking to you. They won't deal with you anymore, and I just thought that was a
like what
great
did you
touch.
do in the first chapter when you were getting rid of the drowners for the merchant, the Hans guy? And the Scoia'tael were like, "We need these supplies." Did you take a
I let them take it. I let them take it. I didn't attack them.
okay, in the second one, have you talked to Raymond yet? In this
Is that the detective guy?
yeah, the detective guy.
Yeah, I've dealt with him a little bit.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you've already talked to him and gone to the inn where it was thrashed?
Gone to the where it was what?
Oh, the
Yeah.
tavern, the
Okay.
Hairy
Yeah.
Boar? And it was thrashed? 'Cause that happens after you talk to
Yeah.
Raymond.
Okay. I know what you mean. Yeah, where a
And it
particular
happened
character is
because
killed. Yeah.
and it's such an insignificant little things, it seems like. Okay, I just let these people have provisions. It seemed like it needed it, and there's no reason for me not to let them have it because there were people in need. Yeah, because of that fact, unless you do or unless I got lucky and I didn't go with the detective because I figured that would finish the storyline for me. So I did all the psychos I could find, including Coleman, who is the person who dies. But for people who don't do that or who don't know about it ahead of time, like just a little thing of letting some Scoia'tael have provisions not only gets rid of a quest for you, but it also changes something like a tavern gets attacked and stuff like that. And it's just like, wow, that seemed like such an insignificant little choice I made, and it actually had a bigger
Yeah.
impact
See, I
than I
went the
would
other
have
way.
thought.
For some reason, I went to talk to Raymond fairly early on. So I had dealt with Coleman with the whole package you were supposed to deliver, which you couldn't because the guard stole it and whatnot. But then the next time I wandered into town, I said, "Oh, let me go talk to the detective." And yeah, that was a big surprise when I got back to the tavern. The next time, I was like, "How what? Wait, huh?" And I even had
I
a
was like,
quest from him that I
oh
couldn't finish because
damn,
hey, he was dead. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the rat. I don't remember what happens when you finish it. I
It's not a
don't.
big quest. I don't think you get a lot of experience for it or anything. And in the scheme of things, from reading a walkthrough, it doesn't affect a lot.
Yeah, you just find out he's actually like snitching on the salamander or something like that
Something like that, yeah.
to Vincent, but like it may not be a big quest, but it's just like wow, that's gone. That's because of something I did in a previous quest in another chapter that I wouldn't have thought. Like if this was, yeah, it's just wow. I like stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like the whole thing about. I mean, I think somebody in some walkthrough or something described it as you could have like three different types of witchers. You can have the one that stays neutral. You could have the one that's very empathetic, and tries to avoid, tries to make choices based on his morals. And you could have one that just tries to do the right thing and not kill people unnecessarily. And which is kind of the way I'm playing it. And I saw no reason to kill the elves because they weren't hurting me.
Yeah,
The
it's
goods were
actually the
obviously theirs. Well, why would I attack them? I have nothing against elves.
and I ended up on the neutral path actually, but it's funny because while everything you do does sort of affect the Witcher and the quest you do, what determines your path is actually just one only one pivotal choice in the game. I'm not going to tell you what it is. But you met Dandelion. Have you met Dandelion yet?
No, I haven't met him yet. I'm almost at that quest where I'm going to meet him. That's coming
Yeah,
up. Yeah.
through Shani, yes.
Shani party. Yeah,
Um,
I've been to Shani's house and I'm kind of finished with the hospital stuff, so I'm getting to the point where I'm going to be wrapping up on that.
he's
Basically
a
chasing suspects and stuff right now.
he's a good friend of yours. But it's a part where you're the thing about the little choices, they make the big choices so much more hard to make because if the little choices have such an effect, the big choices are like, wow, what's gonna happen? But there's one choice in particular when you're pretty much in between a rock and a hard place, and you kind of have uh three ways it can go. But at any rate, Dandelion will say, okay, I'm not going to tell you what the choice is, and I'm going to sort of generalize what he says, but basically it says, okay, this feels like a really pivotal decision that we're making that's going to have a lot of consequences. So choose carefully, and whatever you choose here, kind of determines what the path is. After that you're officially on that path, one of the paths of the order. So you're on the order side, you're on the side of the Scoia'tael, or you're on the neutral Witcher path. In fact, I think depending on a dialogue choice you make pre-Dandelion determines whether or not you have the choice of being order and Scoia'tael. Because I didn't want I had wanted nothing to do with the order. So I told them straight up, okay, let me go and try to solve this issue, but I'm not gonna do what you want me to do. And I think because I said that, it only gave me a choice of neutral and Storytell. But like, but yeah, that one choice actually determines what your Raven armor is going to be because of the path you made, and overall how everyone responds to the choices you made. I mean, I actually chose the path of the squirrels first because 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 I sided with them. Then after I found out more about them, after I sided with them, and actually after I see it the way it affected Triss, who I chose as my love, as the person that I love, mainly because if you choose the other people that you can choose, it kind of sucks because in The Witcher 2, it just says you had a falling out with them and that you went back to Triss anyways. And actually, from what I've read, if you choose the other people, the dialogues you have with them, while it seems sweet and nice and stuff, and they love you, it seems kind of uncomfortable for Geralt because while he chose this person, it's like he knows he has certain feelings towards Triss, as mentioned in the beginning of the game, and even though he went against those feelings, it's like subconsciously he knows that he's supposed to be in love with Triss, and it's more comfortable with Triss at any rate, so that's why I chose that. But anyway, I chose the path I chose is because I felt like it had the best effect on Triss. It didn't put her in a hard position because she's politically involved and everything, but also because of personal reasons of stuff I found out about the squirrels and the order that made me choose neutrality. I mean, it may not be things that would bother you or anyone else because it's all actually quite personal. It doesn't matter. It's not a matter of right or wrong. So I like that too. But yeah, it's interesting how you can have 3 different games, and even though you make that one choice uh, that is what determines your path, everything you do throughout the whole game still matters, even though it's only that choice that determines your path. So it's fun stuff. Like you said
Yeah,
with
I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking
yeah.
forward to coming to that point and having to make that decision. And like you said, and it's replayability because you could play it and say, "Oh, I didn't want to do that," and but you carry it through to the end and you go back and try it a different way.
Yeah. So many it's gotten to the point where in Witcher at near the end of Witcher 1 and in Witcher 2, before I even think about talking to people, or if it looks like I'm about to approach people that are waiting for me, I just save it, just in case I have to make a choice and I wanna see both outcomes and I don't know which one I'll like. And it's just
Yeah, the quick save key comes in very handy at that point.
oh, yeah. Wait, was there a quick save in The Witcher 1?
Yeah, F5.
Oh, I wish I knew that, or maybe I needed to bind it at any rate. I looked through the controls and I didn't see an F5, so I didn't even try it. Damn it. I was doing the slow way of quick saving, clicking and clicking this and clicking save and clicking overwrite, and then all of that. Yeah, well, at least I know about the quick save in The Witcher 2. But yeah, that I think we can go on all day about The Witcher because even though we both tried it in the past, I personally disliked it the first time I tried it. But now that we both tried it and we understand more about video games in general, and we understand more about the game because we gave ourselves a bit of background information before going in, because it could be very overwhelming. Freaking, I love the game, it sounds like you love the game too, and I'm gonna love this series.
Well, I'll tell you what. Once you get The Witcher 3, and we both had time to play it, we'll reconvene and talk about it again, maybe in the fall or something. How's that sound?
Oh, definitely. We can add Witcher 2 to the conversation too.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about Witcher 2 in the meantime. I mean, I'm always happy to come back. I had fun doing this.
Yeah, and we went longer than I thought we would, because we only had quote one guest before, and he was kind of unresponsive. But yeah, it was good. It was good
Oh,
talk.
Fuff get me talking, and you can't get me stopped sometimes.
Yeah, me too. As we found out. But yeah, I think that is a good place. I think it'd be the best place to wrap this up right now because we can go on forever. And
Yeah, sounds like a good time. My coffee cup's empty. I'm due for another cup of coffee.
well, thank you for being on the show. It was
And thank you for having me. I had fun. And I look forward to coming on in the future.
yeah, very good conversation. And for people who have watched our past podcast, as you know, Bunny and Nalir was supposed to be here, but she had to get ready for Fanime. Bunny and Nalir are both going to a convention this upcoming. Is it Memorial Day the upcoming weekend?
Yeah, already.
So
Memorial Day. Where do a year go?
yeah, so it's gonna be Memorial Day where Fanime is always on. So Bunny should be back by Tuesday, and Nalir maybe. But just to reiterate, if they're both back on next Tuesday, we're gonna talk the whole time about what they did at Fanime and stuff like that. If not, then Bunny and I will come up with our own topics to talk about in the meantime, and then the following week you will have the whole Fanime and get to hear about what Bunny and Niller did. And then after that, we'll go back to business as usual. We should actually have another guest because someone also from TAL. You probably see quite a few guests from the Arcane Light because Bunny and Harle and I and Wolffriend as well are all um, communities of the Arcane Light, and that's where we meet a lot of our people that we talk to. So we're gonna have more guests from there, as well as have Wolffriend come back. For now, at least 2 more times, so we can talk about Witcher 2 when we both beat it, and then Witcher 3 when we both beat it. And
Sounds like a plan to me.
yeah, and so we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Good night.